The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Tuesday evening, September 5th. I hope everybody's having a great beginning of your week, short week. Hope you had a great long weekend. All right. Thanks for joining me tonight. Just a couple of, so we're going to talk about nationalism today, what it is, and are there positive forms of it, negative forms on it, how it plays into the current culture of lost meaning, lost purpose, and a search for meaning and purpose. And of course, the massive disunity that exists in this country and how nationalism plays into that as well. So we'll talk about that, and we'll cover a bunch of that, and you guys can participate through the super chat. You can ask questions, you can make comments, you can argue with me, you can just use it to support the show. It really up to you. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Catherine. We do have a goal for the super chat, $650 for the evening shows, but it's completely up to you how much you choose to support and what we achieve in any given day. All right, let's see. Two quick announcements. One, I've been noticing on PayPal that a lot of regular monthly contributors are not being charged. It's like it's saying that they try to charge your credit card and it didn't succeed or something like that. And it's just suddenly there's a bunch of them. So just check out your credit card. Maybe it expired. Maybe there's something wrong with PayPal. Maybe something's going on. But if you want to support the show, if you're still intending to support the show, check to see on PayPal if it's actually happening or not, and maybe a fix is required. Or in some cases, I know people had to re-register because of what it is. So yes, that is announcement number one. Announcement number two is I'm planning, or at least seeing if there's interest in, doing a seminar for a small group of people in London on October 18th on public speaking of all kinds, anything from standing on stage in front of thousands to a boardroom or a presentation or PowerPoint. If you're interested, then drop me an email, Yaron@YaronBrookShow.com, Yaron@YaronBrookShow.com, just expressing interest. I will then let you know about the exact time, location, and price for this. It'll be small group, probably about 10 or under. So there'll be a lot of personalized attention, a lot of detailed work on your particular needs as a public speaker or as a presenter. So if there's something of interest to you, if you're interested in applying for this, just drop me an email, Yaron@YaronBrookShow.com. All right, let's jump in. So nationalism, it seems like it is a topic these days everywhere and constantly. Certainly, I think the war in Ukraine has brought it to the forefront. And I think that, a lot of the America First brought it to the forefront. And then, of course, you're seeing an increase in nationalism around the world. And so it's important to understand what the phenomena is and what, in a sense, it's a response to. Because I don't think this is all happening in a vacuum. You remember the video I showed of Viktor Orban, another example of the rise of nationalism in the West. So what is nationalism, and is it bad, good? Good, bad, ugly? What exactly is the deal with nationalism? I don't want to differentiate nationalism from patriotism. And patriotism is the love of country. And again, I think rational patriotism is patriotism that is earned. That is, a country has to deserve your patriotism, has to earn your patriotism. But patriotism is a love and a devotion to country, right? And it's not above all else. It's not as compared to others. It's just, this is a desire. It is a respect and admiration for the country that you're born you're born into, or the country that you live in. So that would be patriotism. Now, nationalism, we can look at the dictionary, and we can get an idea of what a nationalism is from a dictionary, and there are a number of different definitions. The dictionary.com has a simple definition: identification with one's nation and support for its interest, especially to the exclusion or detriment of the interest of other nations. So to the exclusion and detriment of other nations, is one definition of it. A different term, nationalism. If you look at the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, the attitude that members of a nation have when they care about their national identity, and the actions that members of a nation take when seeking to achieve or sustain self-determination, right? And the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is gives you a whole history of the concept. Nationalism is really a phenomenon of the 19th century. It arises out of kind of nationalistic movements, or movements that try to establish identity, national identity, primarily in Europe during the 19th century, around ethnic relationships, around tribal relationships, and in some cases around geographic areas. But the idea of nationalism is there's something that binds together a group of people under, and therefore they should be under a specific, a particular political entity. They should be under particular political government. Now, historically, again, nations did not exist really, not as nations. So this was really an aspiration. It was an aspiration to unite various tribes, to unite various city-states, or to carve oneself out of an empire, a large state. And to some extent, that process of carving out different nations it continues to this day. And it's interesting to observe it, because I think you gain a lot about what fundamentally nationalism is when you look at the actual process that people are engaged in when they pursue this so-called nation building. Right? What caused Czechoslovakia to split into two countries, to split into two nations? What caused the Balkans to split into, 6 nations? I might be wrong. 6, I think it's 6. Maybe it's more. Maybe 7 nations. So nationalism, at least certainly in the European sense, has often centered around some form of tribalism, some form of ethnicity, whatever the hell that means. Usually it boils down to a tribe. Why is Montenegro a country? Why is Northern Macedonia a country? Why is Kosovo or Bosnia or any one of these a country? Because they relate to one another at some ethnic level. And of course, ethnicity doesn't really mean anything. It's kind of this vague notion. But so nationalism historically has really come as a manifestation of tribalism, a conglomeration of a number of tribes under some kind of cultural or ethnic banner to unite as a particular political entity. And then placing that political entity as the central focus of the people. Sometimes it has to do with language, but not always. Not always. And one has to ask the question of why do some groups hold on to ancient languages when they're not very useful anymore? Who the hell needs, how many how many variations of Spanish? I mean, really, variations where you can't really understand each other exist in Spain, including Basque, which is a completely different language. Why does it even exist? Now, around that, they want to form their own state, their own country, their own nation. Catalan, even in northwest Spain, Galicia has its own language, something between Spanish and Portuguese that is, and they would like to have their own independence and their own state and their own nation, their own political entity. Why? Because the language is similar, but they all speak Spanish, or they all could speak Spanish easily enough. But there's something about tribal affinity and not wanting to share a political entity with other tribes, people from other geographic locations that might be involved. So nationalism is often centered around ethnicity. The United States of America is very different in that sense, because the United States of America is a nation formed out of ideas, not out of tribes. It is a nation formed by basically independence, by the Declaration of Independence, and by the Constitution. It is a nation formed by geography, but not really even geography, because the nation kept expanding. It really is a nation formed by ideas. It's what makes America unique. It's what makes America interesting. It's what makes America the most moral country that ever existed, at least in its inception, at least in its idea. Because what united America, what made America a nation, were its founding ideas, its founding concepts, the ideas of the Enlightenment. And I think that's what made America such a great country, and it's what made America so successful. And in the past, it's what made America, with the exception, big exception, of course, of slavery, what made America such a positive country, such an ambitious country, such a country that ultimately, in which individuals could thrive as individuals. It was a country of individuals. It wasn't a country of tribes. It wasn't a country unified by some tribal identity. It wasn't even a country unified by language. It has always been a country. It has always been a country that has had immigrants who spoke different languages under its banner. And it's a country of patriots because it's been a good country. People love the country. People love the country because it's been a good country. It's been good to them. It's been good to their prospects as individuals. But so that's kind of the context of nation building, national creation, and nationalism. Look, to the extent that nationalism means the pursuit of your nation's best interest, the pursuit of your nation's best interest, then and the nation is worthy of that. That is, the nation is a worthy nation, and those best interests are defined properly. Then nationalism can be a positive force. Ayn Rand uses the term nationalism a couple of times in a positive context, in the context of foreign policy, in the context of the American government's responsibility is the pursuit of the interests of American citizens, the individual rights, the protection, defense of the individual rights of American citizens. And in that sense, nationalism is positive. Nationalism is the orientations towards one's own national interest, but national interest properly defined, properly. And of course, properly defined means in terms of reference to individuals and in terms of reference to individual rights. But individual rights are gone. Individual rights are out the window. Nationalism today, and for most of human history, with the exception of the United States during very minor, with the exception of the United States during certain periods of its history, nationalism has always meant a lot more than just the nation pursuing the interest, the best interest of its individual citizens. Nationalism is an expression of tribalism. And as such, it's an expression of collectivism. Nationalism as an ism in our modern world today is exactly what Orban said it was. It's fundamentally the subjugation of the individual to the group. It's fundamentally about subjugating the individual to the collective, in this case, the nation. When Orban defined what he believes as the true West as being family, nation, God, that's the nationalism that motivates Orban. That's the nationalism that motivates Putin. That's the nationalism that motivates modern nationalists and most nationalists in the past. People who have defined themselves as nationalists have raised a banner, who have raised a banner of nationalism, did not do it in the name of protecting the individual rights of their citizens. They do it always in the name of subjugating their citizens to the state, subjugating their citizens to the collective. And it's always done almost always done in opposition to a threat. Most of the time in a healthy culture, individuals are focused on pursuing their fundamental interests, on pursuing their life, on trying to enjoy their life, on trying to make their life better in whatever ways they understand that to be. We talked about this when I talked about Western civilization. I mean, one of the beauties of Western civilization is you go into cities anywhere in the West, including those countries in the East who have adopted Western civilization, and what you find for the most part is people pursuing their interest. Maybe you might criticize them as them being too materialistic or too this or too that, but generally they're out there trying to build a home, maybe form a family, buy the goods and things that they need, try to enjoy themselves, try to surround themselves with beauty and art and the things that, to the extent that they understand, to the extent that they know. And in that environment, it's very hard to subjugate the individual to some external cause. So it's when in that environment, people start feeling angst because of the rotten philosophy that exists in the culture, because of the subjectivism that they are taught by the left, because they've abandoned religion, but not completely. They know it's BS, but they're not quite ready to say it. They have no unifying ideology. They feel angst. They're worried about the world. They don't know where to find their values. They're searching for meaning. And we live in a world like that. A world where people lack meaning. Yes, they pursue their kind of self-interest in some scopes of their lives, but they don't view self-interest as meaning. They should, but they don't, because our educational institutions don't teach them that. They teach them the opposite. They don't pursue. They don't know where to look for meaning. And indeed, in such a world where people are filled with angst and don't know exactly where to turn and find themselves in search of meaning, is also a society in which you tend to see disunity, because it's a society driven by subjectivism. It's driven by a variety of different groups' attempts to promote various different values. People are not sure which way to go. Lacking purpose, lacking meaning. Again, I think we live in a society like that. Or have been living in that. It's coalescing today, but you're living in a society where, as individuals, people didn't feel like they belonged anywhere, and they didn't feel like, or don't feel like, they have meaning. Religion gave them meaning, not a very good meaning, but it gave them meaning. They've kind of given up on religion. You see that in poll after poll. And whereas Enlightenment values, as we've talked about in the past, gave some people meaning, goals, perspective on the world, those have been eroded by the constant subjectivism and postmodernism and all the left's philosophical agenda, the negation of reality, the negation of the individual. Where do individuals go after they're being negated? And as a consequence, this creates this angst, and it creates an opportunity for somebody to provide meaning, to suggest meaning. And this is why I think nationalism, and this is why nationalism is so in vogue right now, all over Europe, in the United States, but everywhere. I mean, nationalism gives people something to fight for. It gives people meaning. And note that nationalism is never about the value the country really has objectively for the people. You're an American, you should fight for America. You're Italian, you should fight for Italy. You're British, you should fight for the UK. We don't want, and so, again, and this gives people a sense of purpose, it gives a sense of meaning, it gives a sense of belonging. I now belong to a big tribe. And it provides some unity. If before we hated each other because you hold these views and I hold this views, well, one thing we can unite about is we're all Americans. We're all under one big umbrella. And of course, the more unity like that you get under the ban of nationalism, the more authoritarian the government becomes. In an actual rational society, there is no need for nationalism as an idea, as a concept. The idea ultimately arose. I mean, if you want to form a concept, you have to look at how it arose. What's the context in which it arose? It arose in the context of separating people based on their ethnicity to create a variety of different national umbrellas, each dedicated to its own nation, which is just its own little conglomeration of tribes, each dedicated to the subjugation of its own citizen under its own tribal umbrella with its own tribal language, not interested in the individual rights of individuals, interested in preserving, maintaining, sustaining, expanding the tribe. One of the things that brings about nationalism is an external threat. An external threat rallies people around the flag. An external threat rallies people around the concept of the nation, around a mass. A mass as a safe. Individuals seem vulnerable and weak. There's no question in my mind that 9/11 was a real key point in changing, really, the psychology of Americans. We became much more cowardly, much more fearful, and much more, in many respects, nationalistic. It was us versus them in a way that had never been before. In a way, you know, the immediate patriotism after 9/11, I mean, you hoped was good and healthy, but at the end of the day was not. So if you want it wasn't, because it was all about the flag. It was all about being under threat. It was all about uniting to address the threat, and not any kind of real understanding on what we were, who we are, what we're fighting for, who the enemy really is, why that enemy exists. It lacked any kind of introspection, lacked any kind of understanding, lacked any kind of historical analysis in terms of what is America. But our shrewd politicians and our shrewd demagogues use the opportunity to rally people around a flag. But the problem with the threat of Islam and the threat of Islamic terrorists is that it's far away. And the amount of time that it actually reaches America is rare. The amount of, the opportunity to actually threaten the United States does not happen. I mean, 9/11 was a big deal. So the consequences were big, but at the end of the day, much of the emotion around it withered because the threat was just viewed again as distant, as far. The genius of Trump was that he managed to elicit and bring the threat home to people. He managed, and I think this is unique in American history, because I don't think America's ever had this before. He managed to tell us that all of our problems were caused by an external threat. That the only way we could cope with these problems is to unite in opposition to that threat. Not for anything positive. Not for anything real, not for America, because America, again, as an idea, is not something he or his supporters understand or understood. But to rally instead around negatives, around the threat and the evil of China, of immigrants, of elites, of immigrants, again. I mean, he ran a campaign that was typical of nationalist authoritarians. America is great. It's great because it's America. It's great because you were born in America, and therefore it's America, and therefore it's great. But it's under threat. It's under threat. You can see that in the dilapidated neighborhoods, in the high crime rates. Never mind the crime was low, but in the high crime rates, you don't actually, if you're a demagogue, you don't actually have to talk about the truth. It's, we're losing jobs. America is decaying and in decline and in default. And it's everything, massive amounts of horrible things. I mean, carnage in the streets of America. But it's not your fault because you're great, because you're American. Americans are great. Americans are great. So the real problem that you're having, all these problems that you're having, are caused by the other. Remember the definition of nationalism as opposed to? Well, they're causing these problems. So we need to focus on America in opposition to all these others. And who are these others? Again, the Chinese, the Mexicans, the immigrants, the swamp, the elites we don't like, the elites we don't agree with, not the elites we like and the ones that we agree with. And only I can represent America in defeating these elites. And that's how he won. And if he plays that again, that's the card he plays. If he plays it well and he plays it effectively, and if the economy's not doing well and people feel this angst, and people are divided, and people are looking for answers and looking for meaning, he'll win again if he plays it that way. He certainly can. And this is not unique to him. Leaders all over the world use the same thing. Orban has basically solidified his position in Hungary as an authoritarian nationalist by rejecting immigration, by rejecting the other. Not that anybody actually wanted to emigrate to Hungary. All they wanted to do is pass through to get to Germany. But by standing up against the immigrants, he managed to separate, to define a nationalism for the Hungarian people. And the more nationalist he became, the more authoritarian he became. Nationalists almost always are authoritarian. Because what is nationalism? Nationalism, the definition ultimately of nationalism, is the demand to subjugate the individual to the state in the name of the state, not in the name of the proletariat, not in the name of economic justice, not in the name of any of those things, but in the name of the state. It's often associated with mysticism. It's often associated with historical grandeur. Certainly it is in Putin's world. And it is often associated with a glorious past. So there's a great story here, or an example of this, right? Earlier this year, Tunisia's president, in Tunisia, right, Arab country, warned that, quote, hordes of irregular immigrants from sub-Saharan Africa were plotting to change Tunisia's demography. This is replacement theory applied to Tunisia. Replaced the Arab majority. Black Africans, he added, brought, quote, violence, crime, and unacceptable practices. Now, there are very few black Africans in Tunisia. Almost all of them are just traveling through to try to get on boats to go to Europe. They certainly don't want to stay in Tunisia. But this opened up and gave credence to this idea of replacement theory in Tunisia, which gave, I guess, an opening for Tunisians to be openly racist. Violence against blacks, and the slogan "the slaves are replacing us" became a big deal in Tunisia. They're taking all our jobs, and they're destroying our culture and our civilization, even though there's barely any blacks there. And why did he do this? Well, because he was politically weak, trying to unify the country around an opposition, around an enemy. And this was a way to motivate Tunisians to see the commonality among them at a time where they're divided at each other's throats in order to deal with a common enemy, to subjugate their individual interests for the so-called common good, for the national interest. For the national interest. And you see this everywhere. The nation as meaning, as purpose, as giving your life meaning, as giving your life purpose. Just sacrifice for it. I mean, the Nazis used it. The fascists in Italy used it. Of course, the fascists in Italy used the mythology of Rome, right? They were going to resurrect the Roman Empire, just like Putin uses the mythology of a Russian empire. And the Nazis used the mythology of the great German tribes, although they were never unified and they never did anything great. At least the Italians and the Russians have something, but not sure what the Germans had. So in every case, nationalism is used for destroying. It's used for subjugating. It's used for violating the rights of individuals, not for elevating, not for making things better, not for advancing interests. And in that sense, nationalism, used by everybody, is not self-interested. There is no self-interest of the state. There is no self-interest of the nation outside of the interest of individuals. And to the extent that the nation divorces itself from individual rights, to the extent that the nation rejects individual rights, to that extent, it is not serving its self-interest. But that's never been the purpose of nationalism. Again, you cannot understand what nationalism is without understanding its history. And the history of nationalism as a movement, nationalism as a concept, nationalism as a phenomenon in the 19th century is all centered around the primacy of the tribe, the primacy of the collective. Never is it about the self-interest of the individuals within the tribe. With the exception of America, no nation has been established in order to defend individuals. And yes, definitions are crucial. And the definition of nationalism is the placement of the nation above the individual. The definition of nationalism is the subjugation of the individual to the state. And it's been concretized, this definition, over and over and over again in human history by everybody who has elevated the state. Their purpose has never been the elevation of the individual. It's never been the protection of the individual. It's never been the protection of individual rights. It's been the subjugation of that individual to the nation. The purpose of an intellectual, as I see it, me, is not to accept the definitions that are written in the dictionary. It's to look at history, it's to look at reality, it's to look at facts, and figure out what concepts actually mean and how they're being used. And here, what the concept actually means and how it's being used are one. All right. So nationalism is a danger. It is particularly a danger in a time of great angst. It is a particularly at a time of disunity. You know, the Nazis arose in Germany exactly at the time where Germany was most divided, when people hated each other, when the left and the right were at biggest odds, where they were fighting in the streets, where there were constant demonstrations, constant riots, constant violence between Germans. And what unified them was this new conception of nationalism. The same is true of Italy and Mussolini. The same is true of Putin rising up in Russia at a time where there was anarchy in the streets, where rule of violence, and Russia didn't know where to go. Communism fell. Everything was in motion, looking for stability, looking for something to unite around. And you see this over and over and over again everywhere. You see it in the growing nationalism. In Nicaragua is a good example. I was reading about this. Ortega, who used to be a Marxist, has over the last 10 years abandoned his Marxism, is now a rabid Nicaraguan nationalist. Everybody is defined as treasonous to the nation, and thrown out. You know, he's taken the passports of hundreds of people, all in the name of what? Of Nicaragua, the nation, the tribe, the collective. And to hell with individual lives. This is what nationalism means. You can define it in your own way. You can pretend there's something that's different. But the reality is that there's no use for a term like nationalism in a country that truly defends individual rights. There's no use for the term nationalism in a country that actually is focused on individualism and individual rights and protecting its own citizens and maximizing the liberty of those citizens and maximizing the freedom of those citizens. What purpose is there to ever use the term nationalism? A nation acts to protect the rights of its citizens. That's it. Nationalism is used and is a concept defined for the purpose of collectivism, for the purpose, again, of subjugating the individual to the group. And you see it everywhere, right? And it's always in opposition to the other. Opposition to the other. All right, and countries that are seeing rise in nationalism are countries that have done a very good job at demonizing the other, and where people think that the biggest issue they have in their lives, the biggest threat they have in their lives, is a threat from the other, and in order to combat that threat, they must give up their own individual liberty in order to unite around some kind of banner to fight the evil, the perceived evil. Sometimes it's real. Sometimes it's just perceived. That's a joke, Edward. Like when the U.S. seized Iraqi oil, when did the U.S. seize Iraqi oil? That's one of the most, silliest statements ever. I mean, the Iraqis have Iraqi oil. Americans have seized Iraqi oil. When did that happen? All right, let's take a look. We're way behind on the super chat, guys. So consider asking questions. A lot of chatter in the chat, but if you really want to engage, the way to really engage is to support us on the super chat. By the way, one of the manifestations of this tribalism, balkanization, Ayn Rand talked about this, and really nationalism, is all the separatist movements that exist today in Europe. Right? Latest being in a number of separatist movements in Spain, but they're everywhere. They're everywhere. I still don't quite understand. I keep asking the Czechs and the Slovakians why they separated. Oh, because we're Slovakians, we're Czechs. It's all about tribalism. It's all about belonging to a tribe and centering around a tribe. The Slovakians would be a lot better in a affiliate with Czech Republic than they are independent. And I suspect that if the Czech Republic had been able to have the kind of pro-market reforms that they did, if they could have had those applied to Slovakia as well, Czechoslovakia would be a lot richer than these two nations as separate. But the idea of separation, of atomization not around individuals, but around tribes, is really a destructive phenomena in the world today. It's been a destructive phenomena for a long, long time. And I strongly suggest everybody read Ayn Rand's essay on global balkanization, where she saw it coming. She understood that balkanization was necessary, not necessary in the positive sense, but a necessary outcome of the bad ideas that were happening. A necessary outcome of the ideas being promoted in the West over the last 100 years. Balkanization is necessary once individuals lose a sense of self-esteem or lose a sense of identity, lose that individualism, and start clunking around tribes. When we start elevating ethnicity and ethnic backgrounds as morally superior and of moral value, when we start emphasizing language, music, dances, all these things, not on the basis of what is good and what is bad, but on the basis of whether it's mine, whether I have the same genes as the people who originated this or not. That leads to tribalism, balkanization, which is all sister phenomena to nationalism. All right. Again, I encourage everybody to read Ayn Rand's essay on global balkanization. And same thing is happening in the United States, the tribalism that we have, and the calls for breaking up, and then, of course, the calls to unify, not unified around idea, not unified around the principle of individualism, unify around, but we're all Americans. Let's unify around the principle of the flag, not the principles that made this country what it is. All right. Again, ask questions. Super Chat is open. We don't have a lot of questions, and we have not raised a lot of money. So jump in with support or with questions, either way, or both. Right? All right. Michael says, the more you heal, the less you see attention as affection, attachment as connection, codependency as support, disagreement as an attack, luck. I don't get this. Okay, the more you heal, I don't know what that means. The less you see attention as affection, but attention can be affection. Why would you see it less as? Attachment is connection. All right, I'm slow tonight. I don't get it, Michael. You're gonna have to explain it. Support disagreement is an attack. Lack of boundary, lack of boundaries is empathy. External validation is internal self-love. The more you heal, the less you see of that. Okay, so the more rational you are, the less you see that. Okay, I'm missing something, Michael. Hopper Campbell says, fascism and nationalism are always reactions to degeneracy. Yeah, to what's perceived as degeneracy, to a breakup, to fragmentation, to disintegration, to angst, to angst, to people not finding meaning, not knowing what it's all about, degeneracy is just, one way to conceptualize it, I guess, but not ideal and used of course by the Nazis to describe their opposition during the 1930s. Degenerate artists. Clark says, the reason I didn't stop searching until I discovered objectivism was because all the other answers I was given weren't acceptable. They made no sense. That's great. And good for you for keeping an answer, because so many other people just give into the convention, give into what everybody else holds, gives into so I don't quite get it. But at least I fit in. And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of independence and a lot of honesty, I think, to really keep searching and to sustain that search. All right, running out of questions here, guys. This is going to be a short show, which is fine. Be a shorter evening for me. Is San Juan the only place worth living in Puerto Rico? Are you concerned that if enough uber wealthy people move down there, the IRS will change its tax status? Well, I mean, I don't know that the only place worth living in Puerto Rico is San Juan. I mean, it's the only city in Puerto Rico, but a lot of people like to live by the beach. A lot of people like to live in this gated community called Dorado, which is a massive, very exclusive gated community, very high-end and very nice. Some people like to live, overlooking the ocean. Other people like to live in the mountains. I think there are a lot of different places. It depends on your particular values, where you live and how you live. So I don't think there's one generalizable statement about what is the best place for everybody to live. We're all going to choose, hopefully, based on our personal values. Are you concerned that enough uber wealthy people move down there? No, I mean, my tax status is protected by law until 2036. I think it's 2036. Anyway, so after 2036, I won't have the tax status. That's fine. But until 2036, I'll have it. That's a long time. So I'm not worried about it. I hope a lot of people move here. The more people move here, the more money gets invested in San Juan. The more prosperous the place becomes, the more the higher the quality of life, the higher the standard of living for me. I'm a big believer in trickle down. Actually, waterfall down, not trickle. Why trickle? Waterfall. All right, thanks, Liam. Josh had a conversation about corporate politics and curious if you had any thoughts about the topic. Is it useful or not? Is it inevitable? What can make them healthy? I mean, politics is just a term in this context that refers to human interaction within a organization or a context in which there are particular rules and hierarchies. So is there going to be office politics? Sure. Is there going to be departmental politics at a university? Sure. There's hierarchy, there are relationships, and their particular job responsibilities. I think that, what do you call it, corporate politics or workplace politics, I think they are at their healthiest. They are best when roles and responsibilities are clear, where people know who's in charge, who's the boss, when they understand what their role is, and where everybody kind of gets it, where there's no, behind the scenes backstabbing and people don't know and who's the boss and who's making decisions. And so you want transparency. You want transparency into what's actually going on. It's not at all like schisms. It's absolutely nothing like schisms, Scott. So what you want is transparency. What you want is honesty. What you want is objectivity in terms of who is responsible for what and who has authority and how decisions are made. And that minimizes the backstabbing, politicking, lobbying. There's no need for that when everybody knows exactly how things shake down. So that's how you get it to be healthy. You get it to be healthy by introducing transparency, objectivity, and honesty into the process. And the more management engages in that, the more people at the top engage in that, the healthier the corporate culture, and therefore the healthier the politics within a business are. Thank you, Josh, for the $50. Very, very generous. Really appreciate it. Shazbot, regarding Last of Us, can you talk about how music can enhance the beauty of an episode? In this case, Linda Rondstadt, the final shot of the bedroom window would have been much different if it was accompanied only by the sound of the car leaving. Yes, I mean, the reality is, you reminded me, but I had not remembered the connection of Linda Rondstadt and how they both love Linda Rondstadt. But yeah, music. Take a favorite movie of yours. And I don't know if you can do this. You'd have to have kind of a multi-channel system. But just take the music out. Just leave the dialogue and the pictures and everything else and take the music out. And it just becomes a thinner, less engaging, significantly less emotional experience. Music is so essential to movie making, to storytelling, in the context of movies, in the context of TV shows. Great movies, great music enhances the emotions, strengthens what you're feeling, or suggests to you maybe things that are going on that you can't immediately see, that are not visual necessarily, or that are not being said. Music can enhance the romance, can enhance the feeling of love that is being portrayed on the scene, but the acting can only do so much, but the music gets you inside, gets you at their heart, if you will. So music is essential for great movie making and great cinema. And that episode, yes, I forgot about Linda Rondstadt, but that plays dramatically and it enhances everything. That episode is beautifully done. And the life of meaning that they have together, the loss of that life, but they go out together. Which is so much, which gave, I think, it gave meaning to life with a big L. Life with a little L, not worth living. So, yeah, life without music, cinema without music, is cinema without emotion. It's flat. And it's, in that sense, movies are more engaging than plays. And plays are more intellectual than movies. Plays typically do not have music score. and they tend to be less emotional, and they tend to be more cerebral. But the integration of great music and a great script and a great visuals, stunning. When somebody does it right, when a great director puts it all together, it just makes it's truly magnificent, truly magnificent. The car leaving is somebody who comes to the house and discovers them. Is that right? He discovers them dead, and you hear him at the end. You hear a movie. So movie scores are some of the best music written over the last 100 years have been movie scores. Much better than so-called classical music. And TV music is very good. You don't notice it, but that's the beauty of it. It's enhancing your pleasure. It's enhancing, and sometimes it's very, music for movies does not have to live by the principles of music that is just listened to. It can be much more dissonant because it's trying to create the kind of an emotion, but it can only do it because of the combination of the music and what you're seeing. It doesn't stand on its own. Some movie tracks can stand on their own. Some movie tracks are dependent on the visual. They're too dissonant. They're too non-melodic, right? Corey, thank you, Corey. Corey with 160 Australian dollars. Really, really appreciate this. He says, let's make this simple. A nation does not have interests. Individuals have interests. A nation is not an entity apart from the individuals that make up the nation. My God, it's so simple. Unbelievable. Is this all just a form of mysticism in your opinion? So blindness. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, all collectivism is a form of mysticism because all collectivism relies on a mystical epistemology. Because how do we know what's good for the nation? Well, we need somebody to commune with the spirits of the nation, with the something of the nation. How do we know what's good for the tribe? How do we know what's good for the collective, any collective, for the proletarian, for the Aryan race, for whites in America? However you want to define the particular collective, however you want to define the particular collective, how do you know what its interests are? How do you know what's good for it? Well, it can only be done mystically. It can only be done by communing with some kind of spirit of which we all know doesn't exist. But I like your formulation, absolutely. A nation has no interest separate from the interest of the individuals. That's it. There is no such thing as a nation separate from the individuals within it. And what unites the individuals within a nation is a particular political structure. And some nations are good, some nations are bad, depends on the political structure under which governs the particular nation. So yes, like the formulation, you're absolutely right. It's very, very simple. Nationalism, like all collectivisms, ultimately rely on some form of mysticism to elevate something that doesn't exist, to give it some kind of mystical status, epistemological, metaphysical. There's nothing there metaphysically, so it has to be created. It has to be imagined. Thank you, Corey. That was very generous. Really, really appreciate the support. All right, let's see. We're about halfway to our goal. Thanks to primarily Josh Osbart and Corey, really got us halfway, the three of them. So anybody else want to participate to help us get to our goal? Anybody else want to ask questions? $20 questions get priority, and $20 get us to our goal much, much faster. $50, $100 questions get us there even faster. That Doodle Bunny says, who you are tomorrow begins with what you are today. What you do today. So yes, what you do today will shape who you become tomorrow. Of course, it's still you. So it's not like something new completely. Let's see. James. Why do many highly intelligent people prefer to be alone? Well, I don't know. First of all, I don't know if that's true. But I think to the extent it's true, it's because highly intelligent people have the ability, in a sense, to entertain themselves. They find great value in reading. They find great value in thinking. And they often find the company of other people boring. So I think those are the primary reasons. But I'm not sure if that's true. And a lot of times, highly intelligent people are not understood and are shunned, and it's hard for them, and people don't relate to them, and they become alone, not out of choice, but out of just reality. Mystics is anybody who seeks knowledge outside of reality, outside of facts, outside, in a sense, of the evidence of the senses and logic and our conceptual ability to derive from that evidence knowledge. Anybody who seeks knowledge in a world of forms, like Plato, in something out there that's going to imprint, in something that doesn't exist, is a mystic. So mysticism is quite a broad concept in that sense. The Doodle Bunny says, if you need the threat of hell to be a good person, then you're just a bad person on a leash. Yep, absolutely. Hopper Campbell, what do you find to be the most common altruistic inclination people have? I think that the most common altruistic inclination people have is not to take their own life very seriously. It's not to focus attention and energy and thought into making their life the best life that can be. So it's not so much that altruism causes people to constantly think of other people. It's that altruism causes people not to think properly about themselves. That's the main damage that it does. It teaches you not to think about yourself, or not to think about it as that important or that significant, certainly not as it being moral. And therefore, it's superficial, and your values then become superficial. It's the negation of self, which is the most common inclination. And then it's, altruism leads to guilt, because one is thinking about oneself somewhat and not thinking enough about the other. There's never enough. And so there's guilt. It's the tendency of people to always worry about other people and to think about other people instead of thinking and worrying about their own real interests. That, I think, is the main effect altruism has on people. Michael says, will drugs be legalized before prostitution? No, I don't think so. I think prostitution is likely to be legalized before hard drugs. You can see that. There are places in which prostitution is legal, like Nevada. And much of Europe has legal prostitution. In most of Europe, you have legal prostitution, but you don't have drugs legalized. Michael asked, if you're a billionaire, would you still be asking for super chat questions? Yeah, I think so. If I were a billionaire, a lot of things would be different. But yeah, I think I'd still be asking, partially for the value aspect of it, but also because I want your questions. And I think putting dollar to it, makes you think about the question that you're asking. There's an effort involved, and I like that. I like the fact that there's the effort. Now, I'd probably ask for fewer. I probably wouldn't say, I wouldn't have goals. I would just take super chat questions. I wouldn't have a goal. We wouldn't be funding anything if I was a billionaire. But I'd still like the idea that people pay for the question, and it just raises the seriousness that they take it with. Ben, thank you. Ben just did his first super chat. I'm trying to get like these, what do you call it, sound effects, and I need one for like clapping and cheering, and we'll get one of those on this new deck I have, where we have sound effects, so we can do that. So thank you, Ben. Really, really appreciate it. Ben just did $200 as his first super chat ever, and just wanted to help support. I appreciate that. Thank you. That's great. Fantastic. Richard, doesn't meaning come from one's earning their values? Is there more to it than that? No. I mean, meaning comes from your purpose. It comes from your values. The meaning of your life is your life, which is your values, which is your central purpose or your purpose in life. That's what meaning is. It's not out there to be found. It's not external to you. Note all the politicians who tell you to seek something greater than yourself. Jordan Peterson tells you that a lot. Search for something greater than yourself. Live for something greater than yourself. They want you to seek meaning outside of you and something more important than you. And no, your life's meaning is your life. And therefore, what that means is your values. Your career, your choices, the things you love. That's what gives you meaning. There is no meaning outside of that. There is no meaning to be searched out there. Meaning is to be searched in here. Meaning is to be searched in you. What does this life mean to me? What are my values? What do I live for? What do I enjoy? What do I love? In Objectivism, we talk about purpose, which I think is very similar to meaning. And it's the same thing. Your purpose comes from your career. It comes from, again, your values, your creative values. John asked, $50. Thank you, John. Almost at the goal with all these great contributions we've almost made it. Do you think that the appeal of blaming the other is a way to avoid having to own your own life? I.e., if you have not achieved a good life or don't plan to, it's much easier to blame it on the left or right than your own choices. Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is done on a national scale by politicians like Trump saying, no, the rotten situation in America is not your fault. You're Americans after all. How could it be your fault? You're great people. It's the fault of the others. And to an American, he goes, oh yeah, it's not my fault that we voted for rotten politicians who've had rotten policies and spent all my tax money on stupid things. It's immigrants and it's the Chinese. It's them and it's those elites. It's not my choices. And that, of course, is how it's done in politics and how it's done, but it's also done, I think, by a lot of people personally. No, I didn't do anything wrong. It's, I don't know, the universe is against me. It's those people at work, they all undermine me all the time. And maybe that's true in some cases, but often it's a way to excuse your own fault. It's a way to bolster a fake self-esteem while evading what's really going on in the world, in your life, evading the real problems, the real issues. Right. So, yes, John, I think it's absolutely, and it's why a Trump or nationalists generally succeed more effectively when people feel that angst, when people are worried, feel they have a low self-esteem, feel that something is wrong in the world, but they don't know what it is. They don't even. It's not even that they don't blame themselves. They can't really explain what they did wrong. You need to have a whole theory of what's going on in the country, and then a politician will step in and take advantage of that and says, I know what's wrong. You're feeling angst and it's justified, but it's not your fault. Again, not the choices you made. It's those other people. They're at fault. So you take advantage of people's of that condition of lack of meaning, of angst, and frustration, and not knowing why, not knowing what is at the heart of it, not knowing what's really wrong with the world. Andrew, I think that society's punitive response to COVID was partly motivated by Christian-based punishment for our selfish deeds, i.e. productivity. How do you think Christianity's self-punishment premise manifests in our culture? Everywhere. I mean, it's why we're ready to accept, I think you're right about COVID, it's why we're ready to accept all these environmental regulations and why it could get a lot worse. I mean, if you think about environmentalism, it really latches onto original sin. We are flawed as human beings. We destroy nature. We're anti-Mother Earth. We're inherently bad. We need to be controlled. We need to be regulated. We need to be stopped. Progress is bad because it unleashes all this, self-interest and all this original sin, which is fundamentally self-interest and pursuing knowledge. I mean, think about what Adam and Eve get penalized for. They get penalized for pursuit of knowledge, for eating from the tree of knowledge. So it's, and because of this original sin, because we're all sinners, because we're all flawed, because you can't achieve perfection, you've got to pay penance. You got to pay penance. Penance, is that right? Penance. Anyway, I'm confusing myself just because I'm tired right now. And so you've got to pay something. You've got to suffer in some way. You've got to give up something in order to make up for all the flaws, and whether that's lockdowns or whether that's wear a mask or whether that's you can't build that. You can't use electricity on Fridays. You can't eat meat. You can't eat this. You can't do that. Penance. Thank you, penance. It's all motivated by this kind of guilt, and motivated by instilled in us by original sin, by the idea of original sins. All right, we're just $23 short of our goal. It would be great if we made it, and we've got three last questions. Mark Thomas says, what shows are coming in September? What's ARI up to? Shows coming in September. I don't have anything outstanding to announce in terms of shows coming in September. So we'll see. I think Heavy Binswanger is going to be on the show next week, on Thursday, as an interview. Trying to get a bunch of other people, so we'll see who I get. I'll let you know. We're a little behind on booking interviews. I am trying to record a series of interviews with tech people on artificial intelligence, AI. Not necessarily objectivists, just people out there in tech to get a sense of how they view AI. I think that's going to be interesting. So I will be releasing those during the month of September. They're not going to be live. I'm taping them and we'll be releasing them. So those should be interesting. I'm sure there'll be other exciting things. I'll let you know as we go along. What's AOI up to? I think it's the beginning of the semester. I'm still teaching for the summer semester, but that'll end in a couple of weeks. October will be the beginning of the new semester. I'm teaching in October, teaching a new class with Ankar Gate. So the two of us will be team teaching a class on how to look at current events, how to analyze the news. So kind of a class that looks at the principles by which you scan the news, analyze the news, and reflect and analyze it philosophically. So kind of a philosophical detection class. So that will be that's going to be exciting. That'll be fun. That starts probably October 9th. I'll probably be doing the first session. I'm not sure from where. Where am I going to be October 9th? I think I'm in California, probably from California. But that'll be around. I'm doing a debate, 2 debates actually. One debate in New York with Brian Kaplan on anarcho-capitalism. So we're debating anarcho-capitalism. That'll be on September 18th, I think it is, in New York in the evening. Monday, you can, if you're interested in coming, please come. If you're in New York, please come. I'll need all support I can get. Everybody in the audience will be a libertarian, anarcho-capitalist probably. So please come. It's Soho Forum, the Soho Forum. You can look it up and you can get tickets and come. And then I'm debating in Madrid. I'm flying to Madrid, and I hope it's a debate, but they're advertising it not as a debate. But I'm hooking up again with Yoram Chazoni, if you remember, the nationalism guy, the family nation God guy. So Yoram and I will be debating, discussing our different views in Madrid on September 21st, I think. It's a Thursday, whatever the Thursday is, right? So those are coming up. And then in October, I've got this big European trip. In October, I will be in... I'm trying to organize this seminar in London if anybody's interested. So let me know if you're interested, because otherwise I'll just have a free day, which is fine too. But it would be nice to earn a little bit of money. So I'm doing this seminar on public speaking, small, 10 people, very exclusive, lots of personal attention. And so we're going to do that in London on October 18th. I then go to Tbilisi. I'm doing a bunch of talks in Tbilisi, that is in Georgia. And then from there, I go to Amsterdam, and I'm giving a talk in Gouda. Gouda is Gouda cheese, famous from Gouda cheese. So it's just outside of Amsterdam. So we're doing a talk at a high school in Gouda. And then from there, I go to Copenhagen. I'm doing a talk in Copenhagen. Then from Copenhagen, so if you're in any of these places, please come and join us. Then from Copenhagen, I fly to Montenegro, and I'm giving a talk at a university in Montenegro. And then from Montenegro, I fly to, I'm zigzagging, this is ridiculous, but this is the schedule. From Montenegro, I fly to Brussels, and I go from Brussels to Maastricht. Maastricht is again in the Netherlands. And I'll be doing a talk. Do you know my rant about sweatshops? That not the one that's filmed really high quality, but the one that's filmed, somebody's holding an iPhone and filming it from way back in a big auditorium, and it's not high quality, but it's the first thing that really went viral of mine. Anyway, that was done in Maastricht. So I'll be coming back to Maastricht and giving a talk there. And then from Maastricht, I go to Exeter in the UK. And I'm doing a debate at Exeter with the former advisor to the Prime Minister, to the Conservative Prime Minister of the UK, and a former member of Parliament, he will be defending the National Health Service, and I will be attacking the National Health Service. So we will be debating the merits of the NHS in the UK, but it's a conservative. I thought they'd get a leftist, but no, they got a conservative to debate me on the merits of the National Healthcare Service. And then from there, I fly to Lisbon, where I'm giving a talk to a Students for Liberty conference. And then I fly back to London, where I'm participating in a Jordan Peterson 3-day conference. I'm only going to be there for 2 days. Jordan Peterson organized conference. I have no idea what that's going to be like. I'm a little dreading it. But, it should be interesting, and I should be meeting a lot of people there. So all of that. Now, if you're interested in my public speaking seminar, a small seminar, very personal, a lot of attention to you, improve your public speaking skills dramatically, I promise, drop me an email, Yaron@YaronBrookShow.com. Yaron@YaronBrookShow.com. All right. Whew, all right, that was a lot. I thought I was not doing anything in September and October. Okay, Steven says, I love the Max Steiner musical score from The Big Sleep from 1946 with Humphrey Bogart, yes. And from Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead. Yeah, Max Steiner was one of the great musicians, film score musicians of all time. I mean, he's truly is spectacular. Really, really good. Apollo Zeus, your last show I thought was live, I asked a couple of odd questions. Have you read them? No, I haven't. So I don't know, send them somehow or do something like that, and I'll happy to get them to me, and I'll happy to answer them. I didn't see any, I didn't see the chat of that show. And then finally, Josh says, appreciate you talking about this topic. Have fewer questions, but still valuable to hear the refutation of the views of many folks. My pleasure. Thank you, Josh. Yeah, I mean, I think that Corey captured it. A nation does not have interests other than the interests of its individuals, of its individual citizens. Only individuals can have interests. And the job of the nation is just to protect those interests, to protect their ability to pursue those interests. Not to gain them, but to pursue them. That's it. Whew, all right, I'm tired. Oh, Michael has a last question. Do Americans strike you as uniquely narcissistic? Do intellectual cultures typically default to narcissism? Unintellectual cultures typically default to narcissism. I don't know. I don't think American culture is uniquely narcissistic. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Maybe you've got a point. I mean, think of all the reality shows. Think of the Kardashians and the extent to which the Kardashians have influence in the culture. Think of kind of a lot of the rap culture is very narcissistic. See, yes, I think America is a very narcissistic culture, partially because it's individual. It's trying to be individualistic and doesn't know how. How about that? Trying to be individualistic and doesn't know how and falls into the trap of narcissism. And a lot of that is because it's so unintellectual. Maximus X, please ask them to not structure the debates like a regular debate and instead have a conversation like you did with Weinstein. It's more engaging. Certainly the one I think with Yoram Chazoni about nationalism will be more of a conversation. I think that's what they want. I want them to see. I think they want us to see if we can find common ground, which is not what I really want. But the debate on anarcho-capitalism will definitely be a debate. Definitely be a debate, not a conversation. All right, guys, thank you. We reached our goal. Really, really appreciate it. In particular, John, Bull, Corey, Shazbot, Josh, you guys were huge. Ben, of course, huger, I guess. You guys were instrumental in getting us to the target. Thank you to all the super chatters. Thank you to everybody who asked questions and enriched the show by doing so. And I will see you all tomorrow morning for another, or tomorrow morning, I think, for another edition of my news roundup. See you all then.